legends may live, where we explore the mysterious, the unexplained, and the downright eerie. I'm Drew, and today we'll be looking at a case that blurs the lines between cryptids and the paranormal. So get a snack, get comfortable, and here we go. On November 12th, 1966, in a place where the dead rested and the living weren't expecting company, the air was cold and damp, the kind of chill that worked its way into your bones and lingered. The sun had set, leaving only the pale glow of the moon filtering through the trees. 5 men were working late in a small secluded cemetery in Clinton, West Virginia. They were gravediggers. It was a job that required steady hands and a strong stomach. But that night, something was watching them. One of the men, Kenneth Duncan, thinking he heard something, paused mid shovel. At first, they dismissed it. Probably just the wind shifting in the branches, or maybe a deer picking its way through the brush. But then, it happened again. The sound was heavier now, more deliberate, like something was shifting its weight above them. And then, Duncan looked up. There, perched on a thick branch above them, was a dark figure. At first, it didn't make sense. The shadows of the tree blended into the unnatural shape, making it look more like a black mass than anything alive. But then it moved. It unfolded. What they thought were branches were actually wings. Massive, bat-like wings. Kenneth's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't a bird. This wasn't anything natural. The thing shifted on its perch. Its body was humanoid, but unnatural, distorted, like something that wasn't meant to exist. Then, with one powerful motion, it launched itself from the branch. The men staggered back, shielding their faces as the shadowy figure swooped over them. And in that moment, they saw it. Really saw it. A man-like shape, but its wings stretched out far wider than any bird they'd ever seen. And yet it never flapped them. It just glided effortlessly, silently. And as quickly as it had appeared, it disappeared. It was just gone, as if the night swallowed it whole. The trees whispered, the cold air pressed in, the world returned to silence, as if nothing had ever happened. But these men knew what they had seen. They stood there, hearts pounding in their chest, breath heavy, trying to make sense of it. For a while, no one spoke, because how do you explain something so impossible? How do you say, I think we just saw something that shouldn't exist? None of them really wanted to tell anyone. They weren't looking for attention, and the idea of being laughed out of town wasn't appealing. After all, who would believe a bunch of gravediggers claiming they saw a humanoid creature with wings? For a while, they kept quiet, but then more sightings began to surface. Strange things started happening in Point Pleasant, just miles away. Stories of winged figures stalking people, of red eyes glowing in the darkness, of something unnatural lurking in the shadows. And suddenly, they weren't alone. Kenneth Duncan eventually came forward, sharing his story once the Mothman hysteria had taken hold. And that's when people started looking back, wondering if the cemetery sighting had been the first warning, a sign of something to come. Because the strange encounters didn't stop, they only got worse. On November 15th, 1966, a little after 11:30 p.m., two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millette, are cruising in Roger's 1957 Chevy Bel Air. The four of them are just driving around, laughing, talking, and killing time in the aimless way that young adults do in a pre-internet small town. As they drive, the route takes them near the TNT area. It was an old World War II munitions plant on the outskirts of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It was the kind of place that had a weird energy. It was full of those old abandoned buildings, overgrown roads, and it was just a place that had once had purpose but now was a forgotten skeleton of something long gone. As they pass by an old power plant, something catches their headlights. At first, they think it's just a shadow or maybe an animal, but then it moves. And standing there just off the road is a huge humanoid figure. It was at least 6, maybe 7 feet tall, with massive wings folded against its body. But the part that sticks with them, the part that's most unsettling, are its eyes. They're huge, round, and protruding from its head, and somehow glowing red. Roger does exactly what anyone with half a survival instinct would do. He slams his foot on the gas. The car roars forward, tires kicking up gravel, and they rocket away as fast as his Chevy could take them. For a moment, they all feel a bit of relief, and they're tempted to believe it was just a prank or maybe a mix of piled up scrap, poor lighting, and imagination. But then, this thing, it moves again. Not just moves, it takes off. Without even flapping its wings, it rises into the air and starts following them. Roger's still pushing the car faster and faster. 60, 70, 80 miles per hour. The engine's roaring, wind whipping through the open windows. But no matter how fast they go, this thing keeps up. They finally hit 100 miles per hour, tearing down Route 62, and it's still right there, gliding effortlessly. Its glowing eyes are locked onto them. At one point, they swear it gets even closer, close enough that they can hear it. It makes this high pitched screeching noise that makes their hair stand on end. Finally, just as they reach the city limits of Point Pleasant, the thing just peels off. It veers away and disappears into the dark. The second they're safely inside town, they don't even hesitate. They head straight for the police station. Now, keep in mind, these weren't your typical thrill seeking kids looking for attention. The Scarberries and the Millettes were shaken to their core. Their faces were pale, their hands were trembling. When they told their story to Deputy Millard Halstead, he believed them, not just because of the details, but because he knew them. These were local kids that weren't known for making things up. The police actually went out to investigate, but they didn't find anything. No footprints or signs of anything unusual. But here's the kicker. That same night, other residents started reporting strange lights in the sky. Some even claimed to have seen the same winged creature lurking around the TNT area. And this was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, dozens of people would claim to see the creature. They always described it the same: massive wings, the inhuman height, and those glowing red eyes. And just over a year later, disaster would strike. On December 15th, 1967, it all came crashing down. It started with the sightings. For months, people in Point Pleasant claimed to be seeing something unnatural lurking near the Silver Bridge. At first, it was just glimpses. A dark figure perched on the bridge's steel framework, a pair of glowing red eyes staring through the fog. Some thought it was just imagination, a trick of light, a bird, a mass hysteria gripping the town. But then the dreams started. Locals began waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat and haunted by visions of catastrophe. One woman described seeing cars sinking into icy water. Another claimed she saw the bridge collapse in her sleep, 2 weeks before it actually happened. And then there were the phone calls. Several residents reported receiving strange phone calls, lines filled with deep static, a mechanical hum, and sometimes something else. A low voice, speaking words they couldn't understand. And then, of course, there was Mothman. People swore they saw it hovering above the bridge, watching, waiting. But waiting for what? The collapse? On the day of December 15th, it was just after 5 p.m. The Silver Bridge was packed with cars. Holiday traffic was at its peak. People were shopping, running errands, trying to get home before dark. It was cold, the kind of bitter December chill that made the air feel heavy, the kind of day that felt ordinary until it wasn't. Without warning, the bridge shuddered. Some drivers thought it was just the wind. Maybe a passing truck had hit a bump. But then another groan, louder this time. One driver looked up and saw the suspension cables begin to twist. The entire structure began to sway, the steel girders bending like soft clay. And then the bridge collapsed. 31 vehicles, 46 lives lost. It happened so fast that no one even had time to scream. One moment they were sitting in traffic, the next they were plummeting into the freezing Ohio River. The water swallowed cars, people, everything. The lucky ones escaped through shattered windshields, pulling themselves out into the icy current, but others weren't as fortunate. The bridge was gone. In a matter of seconds, Point Pleasant would never be the same again. The aftermath? Rescue teams worked through the night, pulling survivors from the wreckage, retrieving bodies from the freezing depths. The town was in shock, mourning the lives lost, searching for answers. And that's when people started talking. That's when they remembered the warnings, the dreams, the strange phone calls, the red eyes on the bridge, the Mothman. Some survivors swore they saw it, hovering over the collapsed bridge, watching. Did it cause the disaster? Or was it trying to warn them? Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, Mothman vanished. The sightings stopped, the phone calls ended, the strange presence that had loomed over Point Pleasant for a year was gone. And that was what scared people the most. Because if Mothman was really a harbinger of disaster, that meant it had finished its warning and it had moved on. The Silver Bridge collapse was later blamed on a small defect in the suspension chain, something so minor, so undetectable that no one ever saw it coming. But some still believe that someone did, that someone tried to warn them. But what is Mothman really? A cryptid? A supernatural entity? A warning of things to come? And if it is a warning, then the real question is, where will it appear next? For decades, people believed that Mothman belonged to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, that it had appeared once, brought with it tragedy, and then vanished into the unknown. But then, Chicago, hundreds of miles away, decades later, and suddenly it was back. A man walking near Lake Michigan late one night saw something massive soaring between the skyscrapers. At first, he thought it was a huge bird, but as he watched, he realized it wasn't flapping its wings, it was gliding, almost effortlessly, its massive body silhouetted against the city lights. Then, for just a second, it turned its head toward him. Two glowing red eyes locked onto his. A wave of terror washed over him. Not fear like you get when you see something scary. This was different. He would describe it as pure, primal dread. Something deep inside him screamed, "Get away, now." And when he blinked, it was gone. For years, that first sighting was just seen as an urban myth, a strange but isolated event. But in 2016, that changed. Reports exploded. People across Chicago's downtown district, businessmen, late night workers, delivery drivers, all started seeing the same thing. A dark winged figure soaring between buildings, a tall humanoid creature with bat like wings, and always those red eyes. Some described a sense of unease creeping up their spine before they even saw it. A few even claimed that before they looked up, they heard it first. A sound like a deep, distorted hum, almost like a mechanical vibration in the air. And then there it was. Some saw it perching on rooftops, watching them from above. Others swore they saw it dart between the Willis Tower and the Hancock Building, moving too fast for anything human. But one of the most chilling encounters came from a security guard at O'Hare International Airport. In 2017, just after midnight, the guard was making his usual rounds, checking the perimeter fence near a secluded cargo area. He wasn't expecting much, just another quiet night. And then he heard something. It wasn't that familiar sound of a plane, it wasn't the wind, it was something else. He turned slowly, and there it was, a figure, 7, maybe 8 feet tall, massive wings stretched out from its back, leathery and unnatural. And then it turned its head, 2 red eyes glowing like burning embers. The guard froze. He wanted to move, to run, to scream, but he couldn't. Then the creature spread its wings. In one fluid motion, it lifted off the ground, taking flight and disappearing into the night. The guard stood there for what felt like an eternity, unable to breathe. When he finally found his voice, he radioed his supervisor. But by the time backup arrived, it was long gone. Over the next few months, the sightings continued. People described the same creature, a humanoid figure, dark, menacing, glowing red eyes that filled them with fear, massive wings gliding effortlessly between the city's buildings. Local news outlets caught wind of the reports. Soon, cryptid researchers, paranormal investigators, and even skeptics started taking notice. Was this modern resurgence of the Mothman legend? And more importantly, was it a warning? Some say that the Chicago Mothman was the same entity that haunted Point Pleasant, that after the Silver Bridge collapse, it simply moved on, waiting for the next disaster. Others claim it's an entirely different cryptid, a relative of Mothman, or even something otherworldly, an entity that feeds off of fear, appearing before moments of mass panic and catastrophe. And then, of course, there are the skeptics. They argue that it's just a misidentified bird, or even large drones, a hoax filled by urban legends. But if that's true, why do the people who see it all describe the same overwhelming fear? Not fear like you feel when you're in danger, no. Something much deeper. Something instinctual. Something that tells you you're looking at something you were never meant to see. So, what do you think? Is Mothman real? A warning? A harbinger of disaster? Or just an old legend that refuses to die? And that wraps up today's episode of Legends May Live. Let me know your thoughts, or if you've got a story of your own, we'd love to hear it. You can find us at legendsmaylive.com or on social media. Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend who loves a good eerie tale. Until next time, keep your eyes open and keep a lookout, because it turns out legends may live.